I have read 24 books so far this year. I do have some favorites, and I decided maybe I should make a top 5 of my favorite books so far this year. My cat has found a ladybug that she's trying to dig at. She ate it! Well, on that note, let's start with an honorable mention. The Unworthy by Agustina Bazterrica. I think that's how you pronounce her name. I always have problems with this. The Unworthy is a post-apocalyptic gothic love story horror, I guess you could call it. Unfortunately, it doesn't have that much of a plot. It was also originally written in Argentinian, and so there are some translation issues when it comes to converting that into English. But what I love about this book so much is Agustina's prose. She is incredible at painting a picture pretty vividly in your mind without over-explaining. Her prose overall is beautiful, the way that she describes pretty horrific scenes and details of things that happen to other characters in the book, again without over-explaining or going into too gruesome detail that is to the point of not enjoyable anymore. But her explanations of the world and why the world is the way it is and how she views it and why she's writing these notes, which this entire book is comprised of her notes that she's writing while hiding in a tower somewhere. And the world just feels so mysterious. Anyway, I don't want to spend too much time on this book because it's only an honorable mention, but still, this has been one of my favorite books I've read so far this year, and I can't wait to read more from Agustina, including one of her most popular books, Tender is the Flesh. So that then brings us to our number 5 spot, and that sun is really bright. Our number 5 spot is actually the third book that I read this year, and I started it about the first week of January, and it has stuck with me ever since. And that book is Blood Meridian by Cormac McCarthy. Blood Meridian, and you've probably heard this before, is one of the most violent and gruesome books I have ever read. It also happens to be one of the most difficult books I have ever read, period. And that's not just because of the subject matter, it's also because Cormac McCarthy doesn't like to use punctuation. Like literally, he will have run-on sentences that will last an entire paragraph, and he'll use a single comma and a single period. There are no quotations when a character starts speaking, and so you'll be halfway through a line of dialogue, realize that it's a conversation between two people, and have to backtrack to the beginning of the paragraph to figure out who started that conversation. Hi, Cleo. There's also not really much of a plot. Things just kind of happen all the way from the beginning of the book to the end of the book. At least if there is a plot, I wasn't really able to follow it. And maybe that comes under my first point of it being a very complicated and hard to read book. But regardless, why I like this book so much is because McCarthy's depiction of violence and gore and the horrible desert environment that they are constantly having to travel across. Cormac sometimes depicts the violence a little bit too much. He goes into too much detail about how a character's brains splattered onto the ground and how they looked like fried eggs if it was hamburger meat. Stuff like this. His prose can also be very good. Besides the lack of punctuation, he is very good at describing what a character is feeling, or what a character is going through, or why an environment is so hazardous. Again, sometimes he can over-explain this, and so you'll just be reading 3 pages about how brutal the desert is, and then you'll read that same type of paragraph 15 times throughout this book. And I know I'm not selling this book very well to you right now, but the truth of the matter is, I did really like this book. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. And yeah, this is my 5th favorite book that I've read so far this year. Now, the honest truth is that these next 4 spots could be divided between 2 different authors that I've read this year. But I tried to be fair and only give 1 spot to a different author, which proved a little bit difficult because I've only really read 2 authors the entire beginning of this year because I've been obsessed. That being said, this next book I did find was very, very good, and that is Don't Fear the Reaper by Stephen Graham Jones. The only real problem that I ever had with this book is that the ending feels a little bit rushed and it lacks impact. The whole point of this book is that a slasher is on the move, and it feels like a love letter to 80s and 90s slasher films. It's also the sequel to a book called My Heart is a Chainsaw, which I didn't really love that much, but I decided to give the sequel a go because it had a much higher rating on Goodreads, and it turns out I really liked this book. You'll typically find this book or the first one, My Heart is a Chainsaw, on lists of books that are really gory and violent. And while this book absolutely fits into the nature of gory violence, it's so much more than that. Now, sticking with the violence and gore for just a moment, it doesn't feel gory and violent for gory and violent sake. Everything is put upon the reader pretty naturally. The way that people are unalived in this book feel proper in the way that a slasher movie would depict people being unalived. And the way that people are killed doesn't feel super cartoonish. It does have some of that cartoonish nature that 80s and 70s and 90s slashers have, but it definitely also has that realism factor to it, because in this book, the movies are just movies, and what's happening is really happening. The biggest up that this book has is the characters. The thing about the first book, which I hate to make comparisons to all the time, but it's the only real merit of comparison that I can have, the characters are extremely well written. They feel extremely relatable, which a lot of that first book doesn't really have that. The first book is also entirely through the point of view of our main protagonist, Jade Daniels. This book, however, is multiple POV. We're constantly switching between different characters, different locations of this town, sometimes even different cities or states. And the story is also very well written. I really like what Stephen Graham Jones has done here with his characters. I gave this book a 4 to 5 stars. The more I think about it, the more I like it. And yeah, I highly recommend this trilogy. Even if you don't like that first book, get through it to read this one because this is a real gem. My third favorite book of this year so far comes from one of the authors that I before mentioned could have taken up this entire list had I not limited it to just one author per spot. And so the book that I'm choosing from this author is How to Sell a Haunted House by Grady Hendrix. This book is wonderful. From the very beginning of the book, it is absolutely heart-shattering what Grady Hendrix does to us as a reader, and immediately making us care about these characters. The thing about Hendrix, if you haven't read him before, is that he writes horror comedy. And so as his books are scary, they are equally that much funny. That wasn't English. We're not cutting it, we're rolling with it. Grady Hendrix is one of my favorite authors working right now. I praise this man every single chance that I get, and this book is my personal favorite work that I have read from him so far. The story here is incredibly well written. It is bookended almost perfectly. The characters you really care for, you understand where the brother and the sister that are fighting constantly throughout this book are coming from. You fully understand both sides. And I think that is exactly how you write an incredible book. You have to make sure that opposing sides equally have the right reasons that they're fighting for. And so if you want to choose a side to go with, then I'm getting too worked up, I'm not even speaking English anymore. But the biggest pro that this book has going for itself is the characters. If your characters suck or I don't care about them, I'm not gonna like your book. I'll probably read through it, finish it, but I'll walk away feeling a little bit disappointed that your characters weren't that well written. Grady Hendrix never has that problem for me. How to Sell a Haunted House is no exception. My second favorite book that I've read this year comes from an author that so far I have only read one book from, but another one of his books is high up on my TBR. It's science fiction, which I know is quite the hit or miss for a lot of people. Some people hate the sci, some people hate the fi, but for me, science fiction, although it's one of my least read genres, also happens to be one of my favorite genres, and it's something that I really need to explore more of. But the book in question is Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. This book is heavy on the science part of science fiction. But what's so amazing about Blake Crouch, who really did his research when writing this book, is that he's really able to break down the science and the physics of exactly how the systems in this book work. And once you understand those systems, which again, Blake Crouch does an incredible job of breaking that down for you and allowing you to understand, you really get to go on some incredible adventure that you understand the physics for, and therefore understand why certain plots may be written the way they are because anything else would be physically impossible. He sets up rules, and those rules are followed to a T. And what we get here is one of the most thrilling books I have ever read. The characters are also extremely relatable. You totally understand where everyone is coming from and why people choose to do things. This book is also completely non-stop. It's only 350 pages. It's written from the first person point of view, so that may not be for everyone. I didn't mind it so much, even though third person is my favorite. And what you get is a non-stop action thriller ride. You know, again, heavy on the science side of things, but not so much like intergalactic space travel. You know, like this isn't Star Wars or Dune. But because this is a thriller, you are going to expect twists. And the twists here are unbelievable. You'll be sitting down having a conversation piece with a certain character, and then something will just happen on 2 paragraphs later, and it will absolutely blow your mind. You will not see it coming. It will be shocking, because this book is very shocking, and it's exciting, and it's thrilling, and it better be thrilling for a thriller. But I absolutely love this book. I gave this an easy 5 out of 5 stars, and I highly recommend it if you haven't read it already. Jeez, I don't know how I feel about this shot. I look like a ghost. You know what though? I think it looks funny. I think we'll go with it. My favorite book that I've read so far this year comes from probably my favorite author of all time. It's the 4th book in a series that I am currently on the final book for, and so it's possible that that book could make it onto next quarter's list by the time I finished it. But of course, the book in question right now is Wizard and Glass by Stephen King. This book is the 4th book that's telling the tale of Roland Deschain, Eddie, Susanna, Jake, and Oy on their adventures across Midworld, trying to prevent the Dark Tower from fully collapsing. If the Dark Tower collapses, then all realities across all space-time will cease to exist. And obviously they can't let that happen. The first 150 pages of this book are extremely tight and thrilling. They're picking up from the cliffhanger that was left at the end of The Wastelands, which is book 3 in the Dark Tower series. And after that intro, the next 600 pages of this 900-page book is a backstory. I know a lot of people hear that and they immediately think this book can't possibly be for me. So I start reading it as a part of my read-along to get through the Dark Tower series, and what I have read here is likely to be one of my favorite books of all time for the foreseeable future. Because it's a backstory, it introduces all kinds of new characters. Again, we only have 600 pages of this book to be able to set up these characters, get the readers fully up to date on their backstories and their interests and their everything. I know I look like a ghost right now, but these are some of the best characters I have ever read in any book ever. This book is unbelievable. I actually can't get over it. It's so good. At its core, it is a beautiful love story, and I think it has some of the best writing that Stephen King has ever done. Now, I've only been through barely a 1/6 of his catalog of all the books he's ever written, but of the 10 or so that I have read, this is just, it's a masterpiece. What I love about it also is that it fully expands into Stephen King's expanded universe. There are other characters from other books that he's written brought into this story, and it is masterful the way he's able to make that work without it feeling forced or feeling like an Easter egg or a wink to the readers. It flows so well and so naturally. To date, this is the only book I have ever given 6 stars to, and it's likely to remain that way for a very long time. Not that another 6-star book has to surpass this, but I can't see any other book I read in the foreseeable future even coming close to this, let alone being a 6-star, if this sets the bar of what a 6-star is for me. I think it also has one of Stephen King's best endings I've ever read. Not that it's his #1 best ending, but it's way up there. I think it's probably top 5. This is a very uncomfortable position, but these are my top 5 plus an honorable mention favorite books that I've read so far this year. I hope that you'll subscribe to the channel. I plan to make a lot more content similar to this, but also, you know, other forms. Talking about books has become a passion of mine, and so I'd love to build up this channel and have a lot of fun with that throughout this year and possibly years to come. Drop a like on this video, I'd really appreciate it. And with all that being said, I love you all, especially you, Steven. Steven, I love you. Hope you all have a nice day.